Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today with Understanding Complaint Management. We're very excited to have everybody on the call as we go through this topic with Melanie from ANAB. Before we go ahead and get started, I do want to go through a couple of housekeeping items, some of those questions that we always get. This is going to be recorded. And so it will be available to you once we get that recorded downloaded. We'll actually send out an email with that recording to you so you have that so you could watch it again. Or if you have to jump off or somebody from your team missed it, they can always watch it at another time as well. We're also going to have a question and answer session towards the last 15 minutes of this hour. And so as we go through the content, if you have questions that bubble up, please feel free to put those into the Q&A section of the Zoom webinar, and we'll make sure to review those at the end and get through those answers. I think from my perspective and Melanie's as well, we really like the engagement and really diving into some of the questions that you come up with based on the content that's presented. Well, let's go ahead and get started. We do have a mix of attendees on today, and as I go through the list of everybody that's attending, I see some familiar names, some brand new names, and so if you're new to our webinar series, welcome. We're excited to have you on. I want to give you a little bit of background about Qualtrics if you've never heard of us before. Qualtrics is an all-in-one compliance management solution that's really built to allow organizations to automate as much of their quality management system as possible. You know, organizations will migrate to Qualtrics when they're ready to move away from that manual burden of either paper-based quality management systems or even Excel, SharePoint, or Shared Drive types systems that they're using today. And they'll bring that into Qualtrics to put automation behind it to really save a lot of time for their organizations and quality teams. Our system and our company has really been around for about 28 years. The way that we got started with compliance and compliance management is our parent company needed to be ISO 9001. They started going through that process and quickly realized that if they were going to do it manually, it was really going to be a burden on their organization and their time. And so the ROI for them was to go ahead and start building software to help make it more streamlined. Well, long story short, the auditor comes in and says, hey, you have something here, you should share it with others. And that's how Qualtrics got started. So now over the last 28 years, we're a leader in the compliance industry, and we're really happy to account or to say that some of the accrediting bodies are our customers, including today's presenter, ANAB. So let me introduce you to Melanie. Melanie Ross has over 20 years of experience in quality assurance, quality control, and quality management. She has worked in several different industries, including chemical, biological, oil and gas, and aerospace. Her main role in each of these industries was the development of management systems, including internal audit programs, vendor qualification procedures, implementation of Lean Six Sigma. Currently, Melanie is a technical products developer for ANAB, designing and delivering training courses and supporting client outreach through business development activities. Her role serves as a technical resource to customers, assessors, and other interested parties. So Melanie, at this point, I'm going to stop sharing my screen so you can share yours.
And I will unmute as well.
I can hear you.
Great.
And I can see your screen.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks for the introduction, Karen. As she mentioned, today we're going to talk about understanding complaint management, which can really be a challenge for a lot of different organizations. Regardless of the standard or standards that govern your management system, complaint management is a requirement that has to be implemented. Oftentimes, though, complaints can slip through the cracks or just get corrected without getting recorded. During the webinar today, we'll talk about the importance of receiving and processing complaints, not only for customer satisfaction, but also as opportunities for improvement for your organization. As Karen said, if you have any questions, submit them in the chat. I agree with her. I love the interaction of the questions after the webinar. So any questions you might have, go ahead and enter them, because like she said, we do have time at the end to address those questions for you. Get my mouse here. So during my talk today, we're going to go over some of the standard requirements for complaint management, along with how to identify a complaint. Customers and other stakeholders submit complaints for a variety of reasons, and it's important that organizations find value in these complaints so that the complaints can be used for continual improvement. Then we'll round out our discussion with some strategies for complaint management. So the official quote unquote definition of a complaint comes from ISO 9000:2015. The definition is a complaint is the expression of dissatisfaction made to an organization related to its products or services or the complaints handling process itself, where a response or resolution is explicitly or implicitly expected. So the key here is that a response or resolution is expected. So the customer has expressed dissatisfaction and they expect some kind of resolution for that. So anytime an organization takes action based on a negative feedback from customers, that is complaint management, even if it's not a formalized process within the organization. So requirements from complaint management come from a variety of different standards, and they're unique to your organization if you're certified or accredited, or if you just self-comply with these standards for your own business practices. So ISO 9001 for quality management systems and ISO/IEC 17025 for the competence of laboratories are two of the most common standards used by organizations. ISO 9001 is also referenced as one of the ways to meet quality system requirements in most accreditation standards, such as ISO/IEC 17025. In clause 10.2.1 of 9001, it states when a nonconformity occurs, including any arising from complaints, the organization shall ... And it goes on to identify 6 actions that the organization shall take. We'll get into those actions when we discuss strategies for complaint management. I just wanted to show you where in 9001 the word complaint comes into, and it's here in talking about nonconformities. 17025 is similar in its requirements for complaint management, where clause 7.9.1 states the laboratory shall have a documented process to receive, evaluate, and make decisions on complaints. Additional clauses in 7.9 identify aspects of the complaint management process that are required, such as acknowledging receipt of the complaint and providing updates to the complainant. The key here is to identify that a complaint has been voiced by the customer, whether that is through a formal complaint submission, via a phone call, or through an email, or even a face-to-face conversation. Anytime a customer expresses dissatisfaction with the services or products provided, the organization must document it, evaluate it, and take actions on it in some manner. One thing while I was putting this webinar together that struck me was this note 2 to entry from ISO 9000, which is the definitions for the ISO 9000 series of documents. And I hadn't necessarily paid attention to this note before, but it's note to entry 3.9.2. And it says complaints are a common indicator of low customer satisfaction, but their absence does not necessarily imply high customer satisfaction. So this points out to the need to identify complaints as such, that they are complaints, because some organizations may say, well, we don't have any customer complaints, but when they really look into it, they do. Customers call customer service. They may say, I'm not happy with XYZ. And the customer service agent will correct that. That doesn't get logged as a complaint, but technically it is. So oftentimes individuals in the organization will receive a complaint and not realize that it is actually a complaint. So an item was missing on an order, or so a new shipment is sent with the item. It's just corrected. Sample IDs are incorrect on a report, so an amended report is sent out. That correction is made, but the complaints are not logged, so trends and issues can't be captured, and improvements can't be made to the system. Customers may be dissatisfied, but without identifying complaints and managing the complaint process, organizational leadership may not even be aware of the issues at hand. And I apologize if you can hear that. My neighbor just came home on his really loud motorcycle. So here's a list of some of the most common complaints that are typically handled through correction and not always identified as complaints. The most common is product or service quality. A customer calls in to say they're dissatisfied with the product or service they received. So is this logged as a complaint? Is it evaluated to determine if there are underlying system issues that could be addressed? Another type of complaint is product or service availability. With supply chain issues occurring in many sectors, this is a common issue these days. While the lack of availability may not be due to the organization's actions, customers may still raise issues with availability, and that should be treated as a complaint. So the same goes for customer service issues. The joke lately is asking to speak to the manager, but legitimate customer service issues should be evaluated and addressed through the complaint management process. Timing of delivery, shipping errors, reporting errors, and accounting errors are also types of complaints. Timing of delivery and shipping errors may be the fault of the shipping company used by an organization, but these complaints should still be logged and addressed by the organization. Maybe a new shipping company needs to be employed, or a renegotiation of the shipping contract should occur. Without identifying these issues as complaints, again, actions can't be taken to address the complaint and improve the related processes and systems. When identifying complaints, look for a gap between what was promised and what was delivered. This can be a comparison of details of contract review versus the product or service that was delivered. What did the customer expect and what did they really get? If promises were made during contract review, were those promises fulfilled? If expectations were not adequately defined during contract review or during the ordering process, then there may be an issue with that process that could lead to improvements. It could also be the case that customer expectations were adequately detailed during the ordering process, but they still ended up dissatisfied in some way. So this is an opportunity for the organization to evaluate its processes to determine if any improvements could be made. While some complaints may just be someone complaining to complain, there is value in almost all complaints or expression of dissatisfaction. Complaints oftentimes highlight a problem in the management system, so you want to focus on the process or processes that are the subject of the complaint. You want to avoid placing blame on personnel. If a customer is dissatisfied, a process failed or the system failed and improvements are warranted. Use the complaint to improve the system and ultimately enhance the customer experience. So when a complaint is received and confirmed that it is truly a complaint, the cause of the complaint should be determined. This allows for appropriate actions to be taken to resolve the complaint and improve the management system, as well as as the product and services provided. Complaints often need immediate correction, such as sending a replacement item or an amended report, like I talked about before. That correction can be made, but the complaint process should not end there. Once the immediate concern has been addressed, continue on with cause analysis. Why did the customer complain? What went wrong? Continue asking questions or performing cause analysis until the true cause of the issue is uncovered. Now, this cause analysis may vary depending on what the complaint is. If a customer complains that their product completely disintegrated when they got it, or they complain that they got the wrong product, those two may have different types of cause analysis, depending on the severity or depending on the risk to the organization. So once you have a cause of the problem, you can put corrective actions into place. You can implement those, leading to permanent solutions. So think of it this way: with cause analysis and corrective action, complaints should not recur. You should have improvements in place, and this will improve customer satisfaction and will save your company time for not having to handle the same issue over and over again. Implementing a complaint management process that incorporates cause analysis and corrective action will lead to process and system improvements in addition to efficiencies gained. So I've said it a few times already that complaints can be used for continual improvement of processes and the management system. It is important to categorize complaints. This not only helps identifying if the complaint occurred previously, but also allows the organization to detect trends in complaints. It can also identify repeat complainants, which can lead to improvements in client management and communication as well. Complaints should be assigned an owner. This person is responsible for investigating the complaint. But to ensure impartiality and no conflict of interest, The person should be independent of the complaint itself, if at all possible. So for example, the technician performing the test should not be the one handling a complaint about the test result. Again, complaint processing and complaint management is not a finger-pointing exercise. The complaint owner should investigate the process that occurred that led to the complaint. This person should also be the one to ensure that the complaint is resolved, not only with the complainant, but also within the management system through process improvements, which includes updates to the management system, such as procedure edits and additional training for personnel. It's also important to adequately and thoroughly define the actions that need to be taken. What actions are needed immediately? What actions will address the cause of the complaint? And what actions need to be taken within the management system? So again, a complaint happens and there is a correction, a new product needs to be sent or a new report needs to be sent, but you need to go further into that cause analysis. You also always want to assign agreed upon timeframe and a responsible party or parties for the implementation of the corrective actions in the management system. Actions without timeframes and responsible parties rarely get completed. If the timeframe needs to be extended, that's fine, as long as the complaint owner is ensuring that the actions do eventually occur. Also, ensure that the responsible parties have the authority to make the necessary changes to the management system so that these changes can occur within the agreed upon timeframe and be permanent solutions so that hopefully the complaint doesn't happen again. One key to using complaints for continual improvement is to develop a robust complaint handling process or procedure. First, ensure that the standard requirements are met, but also ensure that the process or procedure lends itself to accepting and acknowledging complaints, finding the cause of the complaint, and implementing those corrective actions that lead to improvements in the management system. Ensure that those permanent changes are made to address the cause of the complaint. Don't just apply a Band-Aid. This will lead to repeat complaints, which are just a waste of time and energy, and ultimately lead to decreased customer satisfaction. When addressing complaints, ensure that risks and opportunities are updated. A complaint identifies a risk to the organization that may not have been identified previously. Using complaints to feed into risks and opportunities is another way to use complaints for continual improvement. Improving the management system through complaint management ultimately turns dissatisfied customers into satisfied customers because they see that the organization truly values their input and wants to address complaints in a systematic manner. So remember I said ISO 9001 had the word complaint in clause 10.2 for nonconformity. So in clause 10.2.1, this is where we see some of the steps that you can take when complaints occur. As with 17025 standard, organizations need to react when a complaint occurs. This doesn't mean running around with your hands flailing in the air, but you need to initiate the complaint handling process. Acknowledge the complaint and let the complainant know that the organization appreciates their concern and will address it through the complaint management process. Confirm first that the complaint relates to organizational activities so that it can be dealt with appropriately. Evaluate the need for action to eliminate the cause of the complaint. This takes investigation. Gather and verify all necessary information to validate the complaint. Review records, interview personnel, ask questions. Once a cause is determined, implement any action needed. Again, this may involve immediate correction to address the specific needs of the customer, as well as long-term, permanent corrective action to eliminate the cause of the complaint. When actions are taken, it's important to review the effectiveness of the actions to ensure that the cause was truly eliminated. This can be a part of the internal audit process or a simple follow-up in a few months or when the next order is fulfilled for the same or similar product or service. Now, if possible, notify the customer of the outcome of the complaint investigation so that they know the complaint has been addressed. Here again, we see update risks and opportunities. Complete the circle, close the loop, and make sure the management system is updated with permanent changes. Finally, provide any necessary training to personnel involved in the processes related to the corrective actions and the changes within the management system so that they're aware of the changes to the processes. Now, 17025 offers further guidance and requirements on strategies for complaint management in clause 7.9.3. When developing your complaint management process, describe the process for receiving, validating, investigating, and deciding necessary actions. Think of all of those activities that are involved in complaint management. Describe these in enough detail so that those handling complaints understand the importance of each step. Track and record the complaints. Recording complaints is important. Without a record of the complaint, trends cannot be detected, and the complaint cannot be adequately addressed. Describe the mechanism for submitting verbal or email complaints into the complaint management process. And finally, ensure that appropriate action is taken. Again, this is accomplished by assigning a complaint owner. The complaint owner will ensure that appropriate action is taken to not only address the complaint and satisfy the complainant, but again, also to make sure that changes are made to the management system so that the issue does not recur. Here are some additional strategies for complaint management. Listen to the complainant and demonstrate understanding, not only of the complaint, but of their frustration with the issue at hand. Apologize for the issue to the degree necessary. Be sincere with the apology and demonstrate a commitment to resolving the complaint. And then ensure that the complaint is resolved. Don't let it linger. Notify the complainant of the actions taken and of the resolution of the complaint. Allow the complainant to provide feedback on the resolution to ensure their satisfaction, if applicable. And finally, verify the effectiveness of actions taken. If the actions taken did not eliminate the cause of the complaint and the issue happens again, additional cause analysis and corrective actions may be warranted. A successful complaint management program generates effective actions to eliminate causes of complaints and continually improve the management system and organizational operations. Lastly, incorporate the complaint management process into the day-to-day operations of the organization. Ensure personnel understand that complaints are a good thing that lead to process improvements. Complaints are not an opportunity to point fingers or place blame. If a complaint occurs, that means there's a process problem, and the process needs to be improved through cause analysis and corrective action. You can also use complaints as training opportunities. Train on the cause of the complaint for awareness, but also train on the corrective actions taken and the changes made to the management system so that personnel are aware of any procedural changes. Here, before we wrap up, I want to leave you with a series of available guidelines that provide further guidance on complaint management in relation to customer satisfaction. Codes of conduct, complaint handling, dispute resolution, and monitoring and measuring all feed into a robust, effective complaint management program. These guidelines, these are guidelines, keep that in mind. They do not contain requirements. They're not required by ISO 9001 or 17025, but they can provide guidance in developing a complaint management program and understanding how managing complaints can improve customer satisfaction. So to wrap up, complaints provide an opportunity for the organization to determine the cause of an issue. Complaints are a valuable source of identifying opportunities for improvement. While complaints point out issues with the organization, they should be readily accepted in order to determine the cause and implement corrective actions so that you can improve the management system and ultimately improve overall customer satisfaction. Before I turn it back over to Karen, I want to leave you with some additional available resources from ANAB. So ANAB has a lot of different media to further your understanding of standards, accreditation, management systems, and assessments. On the ANAB website, we have free webcasts on a variety of topics. They're about 5 to 20 minutes long, depending on the topic, and can be viewed at any time. We also have a blog page with a wealth of information related to risk, accreditation, standard requirements, and other topics. We also do webinars monthly, like this one that we're doing with Qualtrics this month. Our most recent one was Making Quality Work for Everyone. And you can find recordings of these webinars on the link shown. Sorry, had timing on this slide. And then we offer training in many different areas as well, including internal auditing, standards, risk, and other topics. So as with assessments and pretty much the whole world, training has changed significantly with the pandemic and travel restrictions. All of our traditional in-person courses have been converted to online versions and include exercises and discussions related to the topic at hand. We also offer web-based self-paced training as an option as well. So all of these resources can be found on the ANAB website at anab.ansi.org. And then finally, if you'd like additional information about training or about accreditation services, these are the email addresses that you can use to get additional information from that. And I thank you for listening to me talk about complaint management. I'm going to turn it back over to Karen so she can show you how Qualtrics can assist in managing complaints for your organization.
Oh, great topic. Great presentation, Melanie. Thank you so very much for going into that detail. I know, at least from our side, we always learn a lot more about these specific areas of the standards when we do these presentations. So I'm going to start by sharing my screen. And to what Melanie said, at this point, what we usually do is we go into Qualtrics and we kind of show you, based on what Melanie just talked about, how are organizations managing complaints within a system like Qualtrics. Before we jump into that, and Melanie, can you see my screen?
Yes, I can.
Perfect. Before we jump into that, I want everyone on the webinar to think here for a second. How are you currently managing your complaints? When an auditor comes in and starts asking you questions about your complaint process and asking you for the records to show that you're following your process, what are you going to show them? Are you pulling out Excel files? Are you pulling out your corrective action request files? Are you pulling out paper records? What are you actually doing to make sure that you're proving that you are meeting those requirements per the processes you've put in place for ISO? That's where Qualtrics really steps in, because what we find is with organizations have been doing things manually for sometimes a very long time, for a short time, depending on the organization, what they find is that they quickly become very bogged down with the manual minutia of actual quality, and they find that they're actually doing a lot more paper tracking or manual record tracking than they are actual quality management. So from an organizational standpoint, they want to move to an electronic quality management system to really take on a lot of the administrative work that quality brings for their organization so they can truly focus on their customers and providing quality services. I'm going to pull up Qualtrics and take you through complaint management. Complaints is something that we get questions about often. The nice thing about Qualtrics and customer complaints, it's just one of many features that you use when you're trying to be compliant with 17025 or 9001. And the first place that we start with complaints is usually with filing the complaint. When one comes into the organization, the first step is just making sure that we're tracking all the details of that complaint. That's usually done through our workflow engine. We provide organizations with workflows that really meet some of the processes for ISO. So you can see here's a list of different workflow options that would come in your system. One of them actually being customer feedback, which includes positive and negative feedback, as well as corrective action requests, adult audit management, and so on. So let's dive into customer feedback. What a workflow is the ability to track a process and divide that process into key steps, creating process flow between those steps to make sure that people are being held accountable to take action when it's their turn to push a process forward. So I show you this diagram down here. The first step of our customer feedback is just simply tracking the information that came in through that customer feedback. What happened? Is it a complaint? Is it positive? Is it negative? What were the details of the complaint? When did it happen? From there, we're going to hit submit, and it's automatically going to get sent to the next appropriate team in line for them to take action and determine if a corrective action is necessary for this complaint that came in. When Melanie was talking about, yes, during the customer feedback step, you're probably going to solve that problem relatively quickly, but that doesn't mean that the customer complaint stops there. There's a chance that it will need to go to a corrective action request, and our system was created to really push that process through those steps. I have an example already started. So what I did is I started a customer feedback here for a company that reached out to us with a complaint. So the complaint was submitted by Jane Doe with ABC Company. This is their contact information. I happen to be logged in as Corey White, so I'm saying that I received that feedback. Unfortunately, it was negative. It was received today, and I'm choosing which department that it was associated with. And then at that point, I'm going to give details around that complaint. In this case, maybe the customer reached out to the laboratory and we sent the wrong certificate of analysis. So in order to fix it, we went ahead and sent their most recent. And so we wanted to make sure that we got their attention pretty quickly and solved that issue. I could even attach an email or any transcripts from my conversations here to this record, so everything's in one location when I need to go and look at this record at another time. If I come down here, we're at this step. I'm now about to submit it for feedback review. So if I hit submit, I happen to be Corey, who's a quality manager, so he happens to be the next person in line. He will see all of the information that was submitted in that first step, and now the system is guiding him through the next appropriate steps. So in this case, because there was an issue with our process, we need to go to a corrective action request. So in this case, we need to kick off a car to go through root cause analysis. Why was the wrong C of A sent to the organization? How do we make sure that this doesn't happen in the future? Kind of to what Melanie was saying in terms of the customer complaints. Get to the root cause, implement change so these types of complaints don't continue to happen in the future. Who's going to be responsible for this feedback? Again, being that we're in a demo, I'm going to choose Corey White so all the notifications come to me. But you can see that I could actually pass this responsibility to other people within my organization. Qualtrics has built-in notifications within our system. So anytime somebody else is chosen here, automatic emails and notifications are going to get sent to that individual, letting them know it's now time for them to complete those steps of the processes. Reminders and notifications up to managers also get sent out at that time, letting them know to step in and take action if something is ignored.
Hey, Karen, I'm not able to hear anything.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, goodness. How long have I been out?
Since you were typing, the wrong COA was sent.
Okay, so not too long. Thank you
No.
for everybody. I'm seeing the questions and answers coming in for that. So thank you everybody for letting us know, for letting me know. And thank you, Melanie, for jumping in. So we're here. We've got the feedback received. We know that a corrective action is necessary. What you see in this diagram is if I hit submit, we're now going to launch a corrective action request. That customer complaint has gone away, and now my system is going to launch a corrective action request. Anytime notifications are coming in, because I already see that there is a question about receiving notifications, notifications by Qualtrics will automatically get sent out, and they get sent out based on this legend up here. Anytime they're newly added, anytime it's approaching its due date, is late, or needs to be expedited. So if I just refresh my system, you'll now see that I have a corrective action request here that I need to process. If I open this, what we've done is taken the information that we submitted with that customer complaint, added it here to my corrective action request workflow that we have in the system that's already pre-built. And now we will be guided through the corrective action process. The first step, getting to that root cause analysis. Why did this happen? How do we make sure that this doesn't happen again? And so on. The next step is developing that corrective action plan and going back and forth until that plan has been finalized and it's ready to move forward. From there, we'll implement that plan. We'll make changes to our management system to make sure that that doesn't happen again in the future. And then from there, we even have an effectiveness review with corrective actions. What happens with effectiveness review, it's something that has to happen in the future. It's something that's often missed. What Qualtrics is going to do is you're going to set a date for effectiveness, and it's going to pop up in our system and require somebody to go through that process of our system. So I think it's one of those things that we're just making sure that this process is controlled, guiding you through every step of the process so you can make sure that you have all of the records to prove that you're following this process. When we talk about implementing the corrective action plan, now that we've come up with a new plan, like maybe in our example, we realize that we need to have an extra step before we send out C of As that just does a quality check to make sure that that C of A is the right one that needs to go out. Maybe that's something that we need to add to our process. Well, if that's the case, then that's going to take a requirement of, or that's going to force you to actually update your management system. Because Qualtrics is an all-in-one compliance management system, you can do that directly in our system. So I'm actually going to pop over back to my inbox and click on our documents folder. And we typically don't go into documents when we talk about workflows, but this one's kind of all encompassing. So we're going to. With Qualtrics, we have a document control portion of our product that really allows you to automate the document control process for your organization. We tend to talk to this as the document management lifecycle. It's the idea that at any point somebody's going to access a document, it's always going to be the last published revision of that document. And then when you do make edits to that document, we're going to make sure that it goes through the right approvals and reviews to guarantee that it can be published and ready for your organization to absorb. With Qualtrics, you're going to put all of your SOPs, all of your work instructions, all of your documentation or records into our system. So it's that one source of truth for everything quality. So anytime somebody accesses a document here, it's always that last published revision. These documents that you see here in my document tree, though they are PDFs, if I were to open one of these, you'll actually notice that this is a Word document. We just have an automatic PDF converter in our system that though you're using the Word document to edit it, it's only going to make that PDF available for consumption from your users so they know they can't edit that document. And it's things like that that you'll see within Qualtrics that just take document management to the next level by just trying to automate as much of this process as we possibly can to eliminate some of that manual burden that our customers see with manual systems. That also includes updating information like this with revision number and date that they were published to make sure that this is always up to date in the system, and our system will automatically do that for you. Now, the process that your documents go through looks something like this. This is our document lifecycle process. Documents are put into Qualtrics. After a certain amount of time, they're edited. That editor has the ability to assign additional editors to that document at that time as well. Once that document has been edited, you have the option of sending it out for review. This is a feedback step. This is a way to get other people involved in your organization to give you feedback about the edits that you've made. Does this look good? Did I miss anything? They would give that feedback to the editor so they can incorporate those edits. After that step, it'll get sent out for approval, where all of your approvers are going to get notified by Qualtrics, letting them know to come in and approve that document. Once that last approver has approved that document, those documents will automatically be published and will take the place of the old revision that it's replacing in the system. All of the details about revisions and such will be updated in Qualtrics as well. I show you this process because every time you see an arrow, think about those email notifications that are automatically getting sent out, but also what Qualtrics is doing here. We're going to capture all of the details automatically with every step of this process. So at any point, you can go to the history of a document. We'll pull up the safety manual and look at the history here. And you can see exactly all the details for every revision that we have tracked in our system. who last edited it, the start date, release date, the publish date, the full approval process, any changes that were made, the edit reason, and so on. We use track changes with Word in our system. That's something that will automatically come into Qualtrics as well. So when we go back to our customer complaint example, after the customer complaint has come in and you need to make changes to your management system, this is how you would do that from a document standpoint. Now that the document has been updated, if we pretend that we've updated our customer communication process that we have, now we have to make sure that everybody in the organization is now familiar with that process. How do we do that? There's a testing and training portion of Qualtrics as well that allows you to help track that. I have an acknowledgement test here tied to our customer communication procedure that we've created. And it's simply a test that can get sent out as soon as that new process has been published. It'll point people to that document that has been newly published, asking them to please read that revision that's attached. They would click yes, hit submit, and now quality has record that those individuals are now familiar with that published document that has just been published. If you want to be more detailed and to make sure that they read that document and really retain that information, you can change this to true, false, multiple choice questions, really tracking competency to make sure that they really retained that information. At the end of the day, Melanie, when I think back to all of the webinars that we've done, it's all about record tracking. And that's really why Qualtrics exists today. Trying to get a hold of records easily can also be a challenging when you have manual systems. With Qualtrics, we make that easy in a couple of ways. You can do advanced searches. So for example, here's our advanced search that we have up here. I can actually look and search every customer feedback instance that's been submitted into my Qualtrics instance. I can see the current step, who initiated it, the start and end date, and so on. I also have more detailed reports I can run. So if I come to my reports will be automatically in your system for you. You can also create your own. I've got one here for customer feedback that I can run. So if your assessor is on site or even remote and it starts asking you to see the details of a specific feedback that came in, I can come here, pull up that record and see all the details that were associated with that customer complaint, all of the corrective action information and so on, and the full audit trail of what happened at what time and when, and so on. You can even see here, in this case, we had to launch a corrective action workflow. Here's the ID for that workflow. You can easily find those details and what was collected for that as well. When you're thinking about quality management systems like Qualtrics, what we just went through in that example was really how an all-in-one compliance management solution can help an organization. Qualtrics takes a unique approach. We really see that all of these elements that you would need to manage really should be all in one system. And so we take the all-in-one approach. So therefore, when you purchase Qualtrics, you get document management, testing and training functionality, and our workflow functionality, which includes the best-in-class workflows, one of them being complaint management and the other being, and one of the other ones being corrective action requests. Everything sits on top of a reportable platform, so you have visibility into that system as well. If you have questions about Qualtrics or want to take a deeper dive to see if it's something that's of interest for you and your organization, definitely let us know. We also have a 30-minute webinar that we do bi-weekly, and so that's a great way to just view and see what Qualtrics can do from a product-wide perspective. But at this point, Melanie, I'll invite you to come back on. We have a lot of questions to get through, so we can go ahead and do that.
I'm here.
All right. Number one, would you consider, and this is from Jenny, would you consider employees' complaint need to be addressed in ISO 17025?
Yeah, I saw that question and it's an interesting one. You definitely want to take advantage of employee feedback as well. But the way that the standard 17025 is saying is really outward facing to customers to use your complaint handling process. So it's really a personal choice of the organization based on risk and context and how you want to use employee feedback. Certainly, if someone makes a suggestion that a process is not working or the product is not the way it's supposed to be, then you want to look into that, and that could lead to cause analysis and corrective action. But in my personal opinion only, not ANAB or Qualtrics or ISO, I would keep employee feedback separate from customer complaints.
Great points. All right, here's another one. Are there any types, categories of complaints that are minor enough to be handled through the complete complaint management process?
Well, one of the things that I did make a comment on in the presentation was that cause analysis may look different depending on what the complaint is. And there may be some complaints that are just log and move on. So you definitely want to capture every time there's an expression of dissatisfaction and a resolution's expected. Because if you just say, well, a missing item in a shipment's not really a complaint, we're just going to send the item and move on. Well, how many times does that happen? How many times does someone else have to go back and retouch that one order to put the item in, or to put, to correct the report? So you want to keep track of it. You want to trend it. And that's one thing that's nice about the workflows, is you can trend them there and not necessarily do every single step every single time. So you could have kind of levels of complaints where it's, a high level is a full root cause analysis with management involved, and a low level is correct the problem, track it, trend it, so we can see, is there a systemic problem that needs to be addressed?
Mm-hmm. Great. Here's a question for Qualtrics. Is there someone who can create an API for customers to submit complaints externally into the workflow? Great question, Forrest. We do have an API available with Qualtrics. And so if that's something that you would like to explore, typically the way that it works is that you would just need somebody on your side to create the bridge between the systems. And so if you're creating a website for people to submit complaints and you've got Qualtrics, you just have to build the bridge between the systems to make sure that API can push into our system. If you want to dive into that further, that's a great conversation to have with your account manager, because they can actually dive into the specifics of what are you trying to achieve? What are you trying to accomplish? Is our API endpoints what you need to be able to do that, and so on. So great question. We see API and connecting us with other systems as something that we're getting questions about it. I want to say daily. It's rare we have a conversation now where those questions aren't being asked. So we see that as a big future point, but we do have some endpoints today that we have some organizations using. Great question. We currently use SurveyMonkey for customer surveys. Is there any easy way to integrate having these imported into our system without an internal person needing to re-enter it? And Heather Johnson, are you a customer of Qualtrics? Assuming that you are, because you say imported into your system, and I can't see your email address or the company you're with through Zoom, or I would be able to probably tell you. Same type of answer would go with what Forrest was trying to ask. It would be a good conversation to have with your account manager. APIs could be available. Easy way, not necessarily. There's not going to be like an easy button that's going to automatically take that data in. You would have to look at SurveyMonkey to see if they have an API that you can connect as well. So it would definitely just be a conversation worth having, but I don't believe we've heard of somebody doing that today. Type of feedback received. What does negative feedback mean? And Jenny, I'm assuming that you are asking this because you saw what in our workflow that we actually distinguish between positive feedback, negative feedback, or suggested improvement. The way that we build our best-in-class workflows, we really try to make them very general. And what we're seeing is that more and more people, though customer complaints is something that the standard really requires, any type of feedback it could relate in some type of action for the organization. And so we give you the option of determining if it was a positive, negative, or suggested improvement. And so a negative feedback would actually be like a complaint, like somebody received the wrong C of A, or somebody has a problem with a product, or somebody didn't like how they were how they worked with your organization or something to that nature. So anything that has a negative connotation to it would be considered negative feedback. Melanie, did you need to add anything there?
No, I think you covered it.
Okay.
It's just a semantics,
Yeah.
positive feedback, negative feedback, customer complaint. It's really how the organization wants to define those terms.
Great question. All right, I have call tracks, but I have not received the customer feedback workflow as one of the best in class workflows. Is this one of them, or do I need to create this workflow? Great question, Jessica. If you have call tracks, reach out to your account managers, but I also believe that all of these best in class workflows are also listed in the support portal. So if you have access to the support portal and that's something that you're interested in, you can go ahead and get those there as well. We have, I think what's nice about our best in class is that we're continuing to add more, the more need that we see for them. And so that customer complaint one is one that we're seeing a lot of positive feedback on. Is the personnel section in Qualtrics a place for training records and evidence for competency evaluation? Yes, Laura, absolutely. And so our testing and training portion of the product, what that does without going through a full demo, I can show you a quick report within our system. As you do trainings and tests within Qualtrics is automatically going to track all of those records for your personnel. So like one of the most popular reports that we have is our training matrix. So if I click run and I want to look at all of my users in this system and all the trainings that they've been assigned, I can actually see out of those trainings which ones have been done, which ones have been completed, which ones still need to be done, which ones are mandatory, which ones are optional. And if I want to, I can even drill down in somebody's personnel file like you're asking and see who they are in the company and their personal training records. The personnel will also have access to their own training records too. So if I were to come in here and click on their bloodborne pathogen training, I can actually see the details of when they took this training, what they were specifically trained on, if they took a test, if they passed it, and so on. Again, what Qualtrics is trying to do is automate as much as possible for those ISO standards. And so when you think about all of the manual work it takes just tracking training records, we've put this type of functionality in our system to really help eliminate some of that work. Heather Johnson, yes, we are super new. Great. Well, Heather Johnson, definitely. Yeah, it's something to have a conversation around. If you're super new and you're still in the implementation phase of Qualtrics, it might even be something to ask your trainer about as you go through that process as well. All right. Does Qualtrics provide a service for creating an API that will connect our external website to our Qualtrics account? We don't create the service mostly because they're so unique per customer that we can't support individual customers' bridges between their systems and ours. I think it's a really great question though, in terms of how to do it and things like that. We're there to support you to talk through how to do it, but at the end of the day, we can't support the individual bridge between the systems that you're trying to create and that connection that you're trying to create. Great question, Caesar. And then I have some questions that came in through the chat here as well. So let me make sure that I get these. If there is data entry error in the certificate delivered to a customer and a customer requests to get it corrected, shall the laboratory address it as a complaint? Melanie, that's for you. I'm going to assume that's for you.
Yeah, so this goes hand in hand with the question about should all complaints go through the complaint management process. You definitely want to log that it happened, because if you're correcting reports every day or once a week or once a month or once a year, you need to know that in order to implement improvements in your management system. So that's
Right.
really what the focus is on these customer complaints, is use them as tools to improve your process. So again, if you're correcting 2 reports a day, that's a waste of time. You could figure out what's going on with the process that's causing the error and fix that, and then you wouldn't have to do that again. If you're correcting reports once every 6 months because oops, things happen, then maybe there's no need to do cause analysis and corrective action.
Mm-hmm. Great point. Great point. Here's another one for you, Melanie. Can we receive a copy of the guidelines and the other references that the presenter provided in the last couple of slides?
So those ISO guidelines that I provided on the last slide that were in the blue boxes are actually licensed guidelines. So those have to be purchased through an organization that sells them, such as ANSI. So you can go to the ANSI web store and purchase those. I think I pulled it up. Hold on. They're right around $100 a piece, so they're not super expensive, but we can't provide them because they are licensed copies.
Mm-hmm. Great question. How do you set a later date for effectiveness review in a workflow? So with Qualtrics and the way that our workflows are designed, you have the ability to configure these. And so if you have the need to set a later date for effectiveness review in a workflow, you can actually alter these workflows to allow you to add a date by adding a field into the corrective action workflow process. So you would do that here after implementation plan. You would actually add a field that says add date for effectiveness review. And by doing that, you're able to make sure that that date is going to be sent to individuals at that time. Great question. If you have like that, those are the types of questions that sometimes it takes like a conversation and to kind of show you how to do that. And so if that's something you want to dive into further, definitely feel free to reach out to us and let us know. And we can kind of talk through that with you. After corrective action, it might not resolve the existing issue after measuring its effectiveness. How will you go back and do another option and document that in Qualtrics? So you can actually see here, and I'm not sure if I know how to answer your question, but I'm definitely going to try. And Melanie, actually, you're a user in Qualtrics, so you might be able to answer this as well. After the corrective action, even after you've got effectiveness review, after you do effectiveness review, you might find that the issue that you put forward or the solution didn't work. We actually have a way for you to rework the corrective action. So when you get to effectiveness review, you would have the option of saying, this didn't work, we need to go back to the beginning and start over. And so by doing that and choosing to rework the corrective action, it'll actually take you back and allow you to come up with another solution for the problem. What the nice thing about Qualtrics is going to do, it's not going to override the information that was submitted the first time you did this. It's going to keep that as well, but also track that you reworked that new corrective action and came up with a new plan. All right. So here's a question from Laura that came in. Who do you need to reach out to for more information about Qualtrics? You can either reach out to sales@qualtrics.com, or you can even reach out to me at Karen@qualtrics.com. Our sales team works really close together so we can make sure that you get put in touch with the appropriate person, but we'd be happy to talk to you about what Qualtrics does and see if it would fit your organization's needs. Is there any international function Qualtrics plans to engage soon? I'm not sure I understand that question, Ebenezer. Is there any international function Qualtrics plan to engage soon? In cases of data breach, how does Qualtrics solve that on facility base? So let me talk about the data breaches and the things like that first, and then we can kind of go back. And Ebenezer, you and I might have to connect so I can understand what your initial question was. In terms of data breaches and things like that, security questions are questions that we get all the time. Qualtrics has a hosted solution. It's cloud-based. We also have on-premise solutions as well. We have a lot of government entities that use our product, and so some just aren't able to go hosted. However, the majority, and I'm saying like 95% of our newer customer base goes to our hosted cloud-based offering. We're using Microsoft Azure Cloud for that offering. It goes through regular pen testing. It goes through regular backups and maintenance, and Microsoft Azure themselves is ISO 27001 for security purposes and such. So if you ever really want to get the details, we have documents about those details, because you can imagine we get those often because you hear about data breaches all the time. We're happy to share that information for you. We really stand behind our data security. In fact, we even guarantee uptime at 99.99%. If your system goes down beyond that, we actually put money back towards your subscription of the product. So definitely something that if you're interested in diving into that further, let us know and we can talk about that. All right. And Melanie, did you see any additional questions coming in?
I did see one. It says, can you provide guidance on how to train sales personnel to funnel true complaints
Ooh,
into the
good one.
complaint program, as they may participate in lots of discussions, good and bad? So this is a good question, and there's no one answer for this. Really, it's about having a robust process in place and that all personnel understand the importance of what a true complaint is. So provide training. So you say sales personnel, but some of these smaller laboratories, individuals can just call and a technician can answer the phone, correct the report, get it approved, send it out. And so everyone needs to understand what the complaint process is and what is a complaint and what value is it to funnel those into the complaint program.
Great. All right. Well, that was a lot of wonderful questions. So thank you everybody for submitting those. We're right at the top of the hour. I know, Melanie, again, thank you so much for doing this with us. We think this one had a lot of really great content in it. And would you like to say something before we jump off?
No, I just want to thank you for hosting this webinar. It is a good topic, and it works well with the Qualtrics workflows. And I appreciate all the questions that you have. And I look forward to working with you all again.
Absolutely. If there's anything that we can do from our side to help you, and even after this webinar with questions, feel free to reach out to us, and we're happy to help you out. Have a great day, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Uh-huh.